In the aftermath of the assassination attempt on Mayor George Barrington, a complete investigation took place, looking into former Mayor Thomas Clark's diary, which contained various secrets of the mysterious secret organization, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Mayor Barrington kept the attempt on his life a secret from the public in order to keep the facade of a strong mayor who could not be defeated. Of course, the opposite was true. He was scared and working overtime with his trusted advisors to figure out the problem. If he didn't deal with it, he would soon die a most painful death. Toby Winters was not faring better. While he was the one who found the diary, he was being kept in the dark about the investigation. They told him his insights would be needed, but only after the investigation of the diary was complete. For Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, he sat alone in his lab, forced to pass the time by watching old movies he had stored in a secret compartment. On Friday, Nicholas had visited him briefly. Nicholas mentioned something about an anarchist meeting in San Jose. Toby still could not believe that Nicholas was still working with the anarchists, who had tormented him for days, and killed Gus Blue's parents. The last thing Nicholas told him was that he would try to get back to talk to Toby next Tuesday, but until then, Toby needed to stay on guard. The Novus Ordo Seclorum might be evil, but that didn't make the government any more trustworthy. Toby agreed to an extent, but his fear of Mr. Dominus proved to be so much larger than his fear of Mayor Barrington, that he was willing to do anything to help him stop him. On Saturday, Toby was told by Barrington that on Sunday at 9 a.m., he was requested to go to the town of Amer, which was a northern suburb of Bencoe Falls. In Amer resided the Bencoe Falls History Museum. Toby was told he needed to go to the downstairs section of the museum, where he would be escorted to a secret location by a trusted guard. That was all he was told. Toby had no idea what to expect. On Sunday, Toby took a long, 2-hour drive from his apartment in central Bencoe Falls to the museum in Amer. He had gone to the Bencoe Falls History Museum when he was a kid, but he never went to the downstairs section. After getting a ticket, which he got for free being a government employee, he traveled downstairs. It soon became clear what the downstairs section was all about: the history of Bencoe Falls. Toby saw a statue of Elliot Bencoe, the founder of Bencoe Falls, alongside his best friend and co-founder, Freedom Miller, the founder of Freedom Miller High School, who was coincidentally the great-grandfather of the wise and friendly Archbishop he and Gus met in Ireland. Speaking of Archbishop Connor Miller, there was clearly something more to him than meets the eye, considering he was on the wall of Thomas Clark's secret bunker. Behind Elliot and Freedom stood other figures important in the founding of Bencoe Falls. One of them was David Clark, the great-grandfather of Thomas Clark. Another was Benoit Dupont, a wealthy French aristocrat who immigrated to Bencoe Falls and established the DuPont Mining Corporation as one of the largest companies in California. Standing next to Benoit was the lower body of a statue. Toby wondered who it was supposed to be, but the museum description said that it was unknown. Toby was so intrigued by the museum that he almost forgot why he was there. Before long, he felt a tap on his shoulder. The tall, blond man who tapped him was one of the mayor's personal guards. Without saying a word, Toby followed the guard to an elevator. Once they got into the elevator, Toby tried to test his luck with the guard in order to get information about the meeting. Where are we going? Toby asked. The guard did not respond. Before Toby could ask again, he felt the intense pressure of the elevator going down even more floors. They weren't going underground, they were going deep. Underground. How deep are we going? Toby asked. The guard finally reapplied. 27 stories. Toby stood there in the elevator with a look of complete shock. How could there be a nearly 30-story building underneath the museum? When and why was this built? Finally, after what felt like forever, Toby and the guard reached the bottom floor. As the elevators opened, he saw a long hallway in front of him. At the end of the hallway was a door with a symbol of a bell with a crack in it. Go ahead, said the guard. You're going alone. Toby nodded and walked out of the elevator, while the guard stayed inside and ascended back to the museum. Toby slowly walked through the hallway, unsure of what was in the room. Eventually, he reached the end of the hallway and opened the door, holding his breath. Toby was surprised with what he saw on the other side of the door. It was not some dark, creepy, dusty, old room. No, it was the opposite. The room was a large, cavernous space. The walls were made of smooth, polished stone, and the ceiling was high above. The floor was covered in a thick, soft carpet, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers. In the middle of the room was a table, surrounded by 7 people. One of the 7, a tall, balding man, stood up. Toby Winters, you're finally here. Toby squinted briefly, but soon recognized the man. It was Principal Jordan of Freedom Miller High School. Principal Jordan, what are you doing here? Toby asked. Please, Toby, you're not in school anymore. Principal Jordan smiled. Call me William. So what is this place? Who is everybody? Where is Mayor Barrington? Why did he invite me here? Asked Toby, wanting to get straight to the point. Don't worry, Toby, Principal Jordan assured. When George arrives, he'll explain everything. The 6 other people got out of their seats and started introducing themselves. The first was Sheriff Adam Porter, the man whose daughter's death he was partially responsible for. Toby felt a cramp of guilt in his chest. Good meeting you again, Toby, Sheriff Porter smiled. You already know me, but I want to introduce you to my niece, Dr. Juanita Volio. Ever since my daughter's tragic death, she's been a guiding light in my light. Dr. Juanita Volio walked up to Toby, who looked at her with awe. She had gorgeous bright brown eyes and brown hair, looking almost like the opposite of her cousin Shannon. She looked only about 20 years old, but like Toby, she was a prodigy scientist. While Toby was an expert physicist and chemist, Juanita was a physicist who broke groundbreaking new discoveries for electricity research in Bencow Falls. He was very excited to finally meet her. Nice to meet you, Toby, Juanita said. I've heard you're a brilliant scientist. Maybe we could do some experiments together in the future. Was she trying to flirt with him? Toby had no idea what that last line meant. A middle-aged man was the next to walk to Toby. He was slightly overweight, wearing a bright neon vest with shorts. I'm Jake Clark, Thomas's brother, Jake said. Toby, you seem like the kind of guy to be a little, let's say, mentally special. Special. But even someone special like you should know that Juanita is hitting on you. Come on. We're trying to help you here. Toby and Juanita just blushed. Most in the room just sat in silence at what Jake said. almost like they expected him to act unprofessional. One man was not happy. He was an old, skinny, white-bearded man, who looked as red as an apple. The old man stormed at Jake, "You are behaving extremely unprofessional." Jake, as usual, "What would your brother think about this? Huh?" Jake scoffed, "Still pretending like you have a job anymore, Evan. You haven't been significant to me in 7 years. You're a spoiled brat, Jake," said the old man. "Excuse me, who are you?" Toby asked the old man. "I'm former Vice Mayor Evan Groverfield," said the old man. "I served as Thomas Clark's vice mayor for 26 years from 1990 until 2016, when I stepped down and let George Barrington take my spot." "You didn't really step down, did you?" Jake laughed. "You've been in our business trying to run things you don't know anything about. You need to show respect," demanded former Vice Mayor Groverfield. Another man walked up to Toby, who was standing next to Jordan, Juanita, and Sheriff Porter. He was clean shaven, with hazel eyes and a clean suit. "Toby, you just got to understand that these two will hate each other until the end of time," the man said. "I'm Xavier Klein, by the way. What do you do?" asked Toby. "I'm the commissioner of FERO, which, let's say, is not a fun job to have as a Jewish man. I get death threats left in my mail on a daily basis," said Commissioner Klein. Finally, the final person who had not introduced themselves to Toby walked up to him. She was a middle-aged woman, dressed in upper-class attire. She looked troubled, like she had lost something. "Hello, Toby," she said grimly. "I'm Eleanor Malco." Eleanor Malco. She was the widowed wife of Joshua Malco. Toby felt his cramp of guilt return. On April 28, she lost her husband and her son to communist terrorists. Toby knew who the terrorists really were. It was the Novus Ordo Seclorum, who he was working for as a student of Dominus. He was there as one of the terrorists that stormed Malco Manor. He was the one who killed her son, Richard. He was the one that threw the napalm and burned her husband to death. Sure, he was forced to do it, but he was still responsible for his actions. Toby could only hope God could forgive him. "I'm sorry for your loss," Toby said. "It's okay. One day I will get justice for whoever killed them," Eleanor said. "I've taken over the Malco Insurance Corporation. It's what my husband would have wanted." Toby was about to reply to Eleanor, but he was interrupted by the loud swing of the door. When he looked over to see who it was, he saw the fashionably suited mayor of Bencow Falls, George Barrington. Everyone reacted quickly, returning to their seats at the table. Toby followed the rest and took his own seat. George Barrington walked over to the table as well, taking a seat at the biggest chair. "Some of you are new here." Mayor Barrington smiled at Toby and Juanita. "And some of you were here when we first had these meetings." "Meetings? What meetings?" Toby asked. "A long time ago, Mr. Winters, before you were even born, this room stood as the meeting place for what we like to call the Patriots' Council." Patriots' Council. Toby scratched his head confused. It was founded by Thomas Clark in the mid-1990s. This was back when I was a senator for California, and Clark was still a young mayor. Heck, this was back when Groverfield was still young. The first Patriots' Council consisted of me, Thomas, Jake, Groverfield, a businessman by the name of Granite, and a congressman named Campbell. Barrington explained. What was the Patriots' Council's purpose? Toby inquired. We were a group of young people back then, trying to make Bencow Falls the best city in the nation. The best city in the world. We were patriots, trying to fix the problems in the city, Mayor Barrington said. Unfortunately, the council disbanded in 1999, when some unfortunate events happened in my life. What happened in 1999? Asked Toby. A few things, Mayor Barrington said. I did some corrupt things back in the day, so I was forced to resign from my post as senator. My brother and his wife were killed in an accident. I hit rock bottom. But I've come back, and we're going to fix this problem better than ever. For the Patriots' Council, the 7 members cheered. Toby didn't know what to think. This Patriots' Council reminded him a lot of the Novus Ordo Seclorum. We've looked over the diary of Thomas Clark, along with the names you told me to look into, Barrington said. While it is clear that this Novus Ordo Seclorum is clearly a real threat, we have hit some roadblocks in the research. For one, most of the diary is encrypted in a language that we cannot decode. When he doesn't speak in this code language, he speaks very vaguely. He speaks of a fat man and his redhead wife. He speaks of a black-haired man and his black-haired daughter. He speaks of a black man. He speaks of a young, green-eyed man. He speaks of a man with a mustache. He never gives any of these people names. So how can I help? Toby asked. You need to tell us everything you know. Barrington answered. Toby didn't know if he could do that. He could not do that. If they knew what Toby did, he could be arrested or killed. Toby wanted to help, but knew he could not reveal everything. He would try to tell them as much as he could. But before you do that, we need to go over the names you gave me. Barrington said. The first person you said was involved in the Novus Ordo Seclorum was the billionaire playboy Harry Roots. I hate that man, Eleanor interjected. He's nothing but a misogynistic dick. I never understood why my husband respected him so much. Harry's rise to becoming a billionaire is extremely suspicious, said former Vice Mayor Groverfield. In 2004, he went from a failed penniless entrepreneur to a millionaire almost overnight. Suspicious, indeed, agreed Principal Jordan. He dropped out of Freedom Miller High School back when my predecessor was the principal there. The reason he gave was that the curriculum wasn't challenging enough. Which was funny, since he was failing half his classes. Jake Clark spoke up. The April 28 attacks were a joke. No one in the media ever raised an eyebrow that out of all the countless members of the BBO, only 2 survived. Did you see what happened to Harry's companies? They rebounded. He went from having a net worth of $9 billion to a net worth of $61 billion. Harry just continues to get richer, Eleanor said with contempt. It seems all the old families of Bencow Falls have lost most of their wealth. All except one, Commissioner Klein said. The DuPonts. Speaking of the DuPonts, Mayor Barrington said. I was first very curious why one of the people that you said was involved in this Novus Ordo Seclorum was a 15-year-old girl. She told me herself that she is more involved than her father, said Toby. No surprise to me, Sheriff Porter said with disgust. You can never trust a DuPont. If Alia DuPont is anything like her father, then she is capable of anything. Pierre DuPont is a weird man, said Jake Clark. He's kind of sad to be honest. I think he really wanted to become my brother's friend. Do you know what he would do? I know where this story is going. Groverfield grumbled. But for once, Jake is right. This story was weird. Jake continued. Pierre would always send videos of his daughter to Thomas. Whether it be at a dance recital, a school play, or a volleyball game, Pierre would just send it to Thomas. No one knows why he did it. Speaking of his daughter, Juanita finally spoke. I used to work at a summer camp when she was 11. Aaliyah acted really nice to everybody and we all thought she was a really sweet kid. One day, on my lunch break, I heard a scream in the distance. When I looked to see what it was, I saw Aaliyah Marie DuPont pushing another girl from the climbing wall. The other girl almost died from a concussion. I tried to tell the higher-up camp counselors what had happened, but Aaliyah denied it and they believed her. Later, she would come up to me in private and threaten me to keep my mouth shut. Even at 11, she was shockingly intimidating. That makes sense, Principal Jordan said. She recently transferred to Freedom Miller High School after the April 4th attacks, yet she is already the most popular student. The first dance she ever came to ended in disaster. Aaliyah wasn't involved in the infamous fight, but I suspect she had a part to play. Sheriff Porter nodded his head. Almost definitely. My daughter was drugged. Probably by her. It was on her father's property that she and 19 other people died. The news blamed Shannon, but I suspect it was the DuPonts. My daughter would never commit arson. My son Braden recently went out to prom with her, said Jake. Apparently she was not pleasant company. Barrington interrupted the conversation. Another name you gave me was VB, the leader of the communists. Eleanor sighed. I've heard the chants of his name in the streets. He is a monster who killed 4,000 people. I don't know his real identity, Toby said. But I saw him once. He is not Russian. He is American. He knew who I was. I suspect he's the communist journalist Victor Benson, said Commissioner Klein. This guy has been harassing government officials for years. Plus, he has the same initials. That would be too obvious, Principal Jordan said. It's probably the poet Valentino Brown. He was a student at Freedom Miller a while back again. Had some pretty radical ideas. That's what you're missing, William, Toby interjected. VB is not a communist. He is someone who is pretending to be communist. He could be anybody. One thing we do know though is that while this VB guy claims to be a communist, George Barrington continued. Otto Walter was not lying about being a Nazi, at least not in his later years. Walter was a nutjob, said Toby. Do you know the real reason I was missing from work for that week a while back? I escaped communist captivity, only to be kidnapped again by this insane Hitler-worshipping fanatic. From 2001 to 2009, Mr. Walter was the commissioner of FERO, said Commissioner Klein. Back then, he was your usual right-wing grifter. But over the 2010s, through my predecessor's tenure as commissioner, the man became more and more extreme. By the time I became commissioner of FERO, Walter was a full-fledged Nazi cult leader. I don't have any real control over the town of FERO. It was ruled by Walter, and now it's ruled by his assistant, Schneider. Finally, George Barrington said, you mentioned the leader of the Novus Ordo Seclorum, Mr. Dominus. He's an old, obese man, said Toby. But he's also the Scariest man I've ever met. If you're wondering why Harry, Alia, VB, and Walter are such evil people, it's because of Dominus. Do you have any knowledge of his real identity? Asked Groverfield. I don't, Toby answered. He's very secretive. You mention he was obese? Asked Principal Jordan. Yes, very fat, said Toby. He broke into my apartment and ate all my food. I know George and Adam are aware, but I'm not sure about the rest of you, said Principal Jordan. On April 20th, an obese man came to Freedom Miller High School during first period gym. I have no clue how he got into the building, but he came into the gymnasium, shot this moronic diabetic gym teacher along with my star football player. That happened? Juanita asked in shock. How did the news not pick up on that? I'm very good at my job, said Principal Jordan. I got the whole class to swear their silence. I was a bit worried when the kid the fat man had kidnapped came back to school the next day, yet he never said anything. Gus Blue. Toby shook a little when he heard that name. Gus Blue. He remembered the time when Dominus had told him that Gus Blue was the key to everything. Do you know of Gus Blue? Barrington asked. Why? Asked Toby. You looked like you knew, said Barrington. So do you? No, Toby lied. Very well. Barrington stood up. I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, we are at a gridlock. A standstill. We know of all these people's shady dealings. But how are they connected? How are they related? Why would an arrogant billionaire work with a fake communist revolutionary who works with a wealthy socialite who works with a Nazi cult leader, all under the leadership of an obese man that shoots up schools? And how does that Irish Archbishop figure into this? It doesn't make any sense. Toby sat there, confused as well. A while back when Mr. Dominus told him what the Novus Ordo Seclorum was, how each one of his students controlled a different aspect of Bencow Falls, and how he was planning to make it global. Back then, he was confused. Today, he remained confused. He remained guilty that he participated in this cult. What was it all about? The brilliant Juanita Volio shot out of her seat. I have an idea. Toby clearly saw what happened to Juanita. The look she had was the same look he would get when he had an epiphany. It was the scientist's revelation. What is it? Juanita asked Sheriff Porter. The Novus Ordo Seclorum is Latin for New Order of the Ages. What did Julius Caesar, the most famous Latin speaker, once say? Juanita asked. Divide and conquer, answered Toby. Exactly, Juanita said excitedly. So the reason everyone is so different is so that Dominus can control the world through different people, Toby said. Each member becomes the leader of one of the tribes. The twist is that all the tribes are working together. There is no choice. Four sides of the same coin. Toby and Juanita both shouted. You guys are in sync. Jake Clark smiled. You guys need to date. Toby and Juanita both blushed. Before former Vice Mayor Groverfield could yell at Jake for being disruptive, Juanita had another epiphany. Wait, Juanita said. Mayor Thomas Clark was shot exactly 27 times. Yeah, so? Asked Jake. How many floors did the elevator have to go down to get to this room? Juanita asked. 27, Barrington said. Shocked. 27. A number that seemed to appear everywhere. The more Toby thought about it, the more he remembered the number showing up in his own life. What could it mean? We know. Thomas Clark knew he was going to die, thanks to the information from his diary, said Juanita. I think it has something to do with that number. But how? Asked Mayor Barrington. Toby realized it was time to tell the rest of the Patriots' Council what he had been keeping secret from them for almost a week. Not a secret that could destroy him, but a secret that they needed to know. There is something I haven't told you, said Toby. What? Asked Groverfield. I learned from Mr. Dominus that. Toby began. Mayor Thomas Clark was one of his students. A member of the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Everyone gasped in shock. No one could believe it. How could that be true? Asked Barrington. I don't know, answered Toby. I'm afraid. He's one of the students I know the least about. I know he betrayed Dominus and paid the price for it. I believe it, said Jake. I was his brother. He was always an opportunist. Former Vice Mayor Groverfield sneered. You were always jealous of your brother. I worked with your brother for years. This can't be true. Principal Jordan interjected. I believe it. I had a meeting with him, along with some of the wealthiest families in Bencow Falls on April 3, the day before the attack. He looked fidgety and guilty. George Barrington stood up. Once again, we'll discuss this issue later, but I think we can all agree that this Patriots' Council meeting has lasted too long. We'll discuss more on Tuesday. For now, have a good rest of your day. The Patriots' Council. George Barrington, Principal Jordan, Jake Clark, former Vice Mayor Groverfield, Commissioner Klein, Eleanor Malco, Sheriff Porter, Juanita Volio, and Toby Winters all left the room and went up the elevator into the museum. As Toby left the Bencow Falls History Museum, he didn't know what to think. How could he keep living this double life? Would the Novus Ordo Seclorum find out about it and kill him? Would the other Patriots' Council members find out who Toby really was? What would Bloodshot think about this? Was Juanita really hitting on him? Or was Jake Clark just an idiot? All these questions needed to be answered. For now, Toby was answerless.